the faster you get the digitization, the better it is for the industry. It is saving money, and better, I think I also mentioned in the beginning, but also for the developing countries. I mean, there's again a World Economic Forum report and also UN report that is looking into what would it mean to reduce trade barriers, and the digitization is part of the trade barriers. And you see that in some of the developing countries, I mean, you could see it's up to 20%. It is a significant reduction in trade barriers.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to the 143rd episode of the Shipping Podcast. I hope that you're safe and that you're staying safe. We are all affected by the pandemic crisis, but now we can see some signs of the new reality that we will have to deal with moving forward. Things that was on the agenda before the COVID-19 is slowly coming back. And one of the things I've been looking into is digitalization of the maritime industry, as you all know. In this episode, we are going to listen to Henrik Hvid Jensen, who is an expert on digitalized global trade and passionate about understanding digital business potential, helping business understand how technologies will shape business models and processes for the future. I hope you will enjoy my conversation with Henrik, which took place over Zoom earlier this week. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Lena. Yes, my name is Henrik Jensen. I'm an independent advisor about digitization of global shipping. I've been in the industry since almost 10 years, I guess, starting with Maersk, where I've been working where I started as head of research innovation, and I did different innovation roles. The most famous innovation I have is probably TradeLens, the blockchain-based collaboration between IBM and Maersk. But since I left Maersk, which is about 2 years ago, I've been doing some work for World Economic Forum on blockchain for global supply chains. I've been working for Inter-American Development Bank on trade single windows. Been doing some work for block shipping on their ICO. Had worked with the guys up in Gothenburg of RISE, where we talked about port collaborative decision making and a number of other things as well.
So how did you first come in contact with shipping? What made you come into this industry?
But again, I mean, Maersk has always been a very interesting company for a Dane. So the first year of Maersk, I was actually there as a consultant. But when I then got the opportunity to work with what I really enjoy, meaning seeing the opportunities with emerging technologies, I mean, the decision wasn't that hard. Working for Maersk and working with emerging technologies was just, fantastic. So I enjoyed that for 7 or 8 years.
But what is your background? What is your education? Are you an engineer or?
No, I'm computer science by education, and then I got a bachelor degree in international economics as well, which fits very well into global trade and digitization of global trade. So, and then I've been within IT for probably like 30 years. So know a bit about how computers work and where they add value.
So finally, I found someone who isn't, born and bred in the maritime industry from the beginning, but started somewhere else and found us.
Yeah.
But you got a bug now, haven't you? To be, you don't want to leave the maritime industry.
No. But it is fascinating. I mean, what you do when you work about digitization global trade, because I've been obvious during my career of 30 years. I obviously have been worked in many different and interesting projects. I mean, also something that has a fairly big impact on the Danish societies. For example, on the digital registration of rights or title to properties. But when you work on digitization of global trade, you're actually doing a difference. You also see some of my articles on World Economic Forum also talks about how accelerated digitization of global trade can actually help reduce poverty in developing countries. And it is just something that is obviously interesting. You can actually build something that has a good business case for the incumbent in the industry, but at the same time, you can also help the world to become a better place to be.
So what do you actually do then to help and to assist the global trade to be digitized? What is your view on this? If you can explain that shortly, I don't know.
But right now I'm trying to come up with some concepts about what is it that is missing within global trade. Try to say perhaps look a little bit further than traditionally. I mean what I see is that the next wave of innovation, of digital innovation, will come from companies looking outside to the ecosystem that they're part of. So not just optimizing or digital optimizing their internal business processes or their immediate interaction with their close business partners, but actually looking at the whole supply chain, the whole value chain that they are part of, and seeing how can we actually optimize the full flow. This is obvious what the customers are interested in is that the full flow actually works and not just each individual part. They have to also work together fluently. So a lot of the work I've been doing for writing about for World Economic Forum on their agenda is about what is for you can say component or modules that is needed in order to accelerate this digitization of the ecosystem. I did write an article I called the File Logistic Internet, which is basically an idea or concept about extending the internet with global trade specific functionality. So not everyone has to create the same thing, but it's you would say it's basically accelerating the innovation of global trade by having some specific or shared building blocks that everyone can build upon. I mean, the examples or the ones, some of the one I identified is, for example, a global trade identity. I mean the whole handling of identities in global trade and basically also in most other industries, they are, is you can say, a hidden cost. I mean, a company like Maersk, as far as I remember, with the numbers was that was like 50 or 60,000 identities to manage as part of their EDI, their API, the user, Maersk.com. And that just has a huge cost. And all customers, there was customers Maersk, there also customers MSC, CMA, etc. They obviously also need to have an account there. So just the hidden cost of managing these identities and managing them safely, etc., is just cumbersome. And this also means that you also, when you don't have a shared identity, it means that before you can actually do interactions with a new partner in your ecosystem, I mean, you need to set up all the APIs, you need to set up a new identity and those kind of things. So the possibility of dynamically interacting with a business partner is just difficult. So the first many interactions, they need to be more or less paper-based, or alternative, you had to go through centralized digital platforms. So therefore, I see, I mean, if you had global trade identity, I mean, one identity for all actors, businesses, governance, etc., it is a building block, a foundational building block in digitization of global trade.
How will it all be connected? Are you looking at blockchain, or what are you? I mean, at the end of the day,
there's different technologies that can solve that one, and blockchain may be an option. I mean, it's still a very early technology, so we haven't really clearly seen where is it that can add value. But I see. I mean, when we talk about business ecosystem, digitization of business ecosystem, I mean, you basically have three options. You either have a centralized option, you have a decentralized option, which is blockchain, or you have a distributed, which is the internet, or similar to the internet. And let me just explain a little bit about what each of them does. I mean, the centralized platform is really what has been the key for, or the way that business ecosystems is working today. Basically means that you have a trusted third party placing themselves in the middle in the ecosystem, and then all transactions go through them. I mean, you know it from hotels.com, from Uber, from Amazon, from Facebook, etc. And it's extremely lucrative business model because they're basically piggybacking all the incumbents in the industry, their investment in assets and services, and then taking a cut 20-30% of the transactions without really having any of the risk. And this is also why you see that many of the biggest companies are actually have a platform model, or the digital giants, as we also talk about. But the challenge with these digital platforms or a centralized digital platform is that they end up being a monopoly. I mean, it has a kind of winner takes it all, or at least a few winners, because maybe there's one in China that as well. But at least there's very few winners there. So it basically means that they get monopoly on the transaction in the industry, and they therefore become, you can say, the new de facto industry leader, which can be great if you are the digital platform, because again, it is extremely lucrative to be in that position. But if you are the incumbent in the industry, that is the risk, because you suddenly is feeding the digital platforms, because again, they have the trust. I mean, they have the identities, as we talked about before. They can harvest all the data for all the transactions and basically becoming smarter and stronger for every transaction that goes through them. And that is obviously a decision that each of the incumbent in the industry need to decide. Is it good to have a trusted third party? Can we live with that I'm just good at sailing a ship from A to B or bringing a container from A to B, and then perhaps accept that there will be somebody in between? Or do we need to be a lot more careful? The interesting thing is also what we also see in many other industries is that these digital platforms, they start to move into the incumbents area. I mean, again, Amazon has started to have physical shops, for example. We have Netflix that is producing movies and series, etc. So even if you say, I just want to be good at sailing a ship from A to B, there is a risk that you actually is feeding within your backyard that in the end is going to eat all of you. Right? So this is the centralized platform, but we still need to do some kind of ecosystem collaboration, and this is where the other possibilities with decentralized or distributed scenarios comes into play. Where the decentralized, which is based on blockchain, means that there's nobody really controlling, that there's not one single entity controlling, there's not an Amazon, there's not a Uber in your industry that is controlling the interface. This is distributed. It is you can say it's a computer protocol on the blockchain that is actually building the trust, setting up the identities and those kind of things. It sounds very interesting, and it is very interesting, but we still need to understand what is the business models around offering these kind of services. I mean, how do you do the governance? Because if you set up a blockchain solution, but with a very narrow blockchain, with a very narrow governance, you will see that the value of decentralization quickly diminishes as soon as you start to put centralized component into that one. So blockchain sounds interesting, and it definitely has the opportunity to fight the digital platforms and giving the necessarily, I talk about political, commercially, and competitive neutrality. But we still need to see if it actually works and if you actually is able to set up the governance structures. The third option, the distributed option, it works in a way that you have, it is what I call a network of networks. So as I said, the internet is a network of networks. I mean, there's several thousand ISPs that connect behind the scene through standards, and that is a third opportunity for the ecosystem collaboration or digital ecosystem collaboration. It is that you have several providers, you can say digital global trade digitization providers that all accept this the standard that is agreed about, for example, with a global trade identity or other parts, and they then again connect behind the scene. So it looks like there's just one, I call them logistic internet, although it's actually provided by several. The benefit is there that each of the participants can then more control their data. I mean, in a centralized platform and actually also on a blockchain platform, you are pumping out events, you're pumping out documents, etc., to centralized place. Because actually blockchain is also it works the same way as a centralized, although you call it decentralized, but that's another discussion. But in a distributed manner, you can actually better control your data, and then just like the internet, that works the way that when you send a request, I mean, shippingpodcast.com, for example, I mean, it goes out on the internet to the routers and the domain name servers there, and it asks who knows about where this one is located, where your homepage is located, and it actually is then traversed around the internet, perhaps a few times around the globe, before you actually end up as a homepage on my browser. The same thing could be done with distributed concept. Is that mean who knows about this shipping, for example, this container number or shipping number or bill of lading number, whatever you have, and that could then be stored again behind the scene, and you can extract those information. That will give some benefit in sense of, again, better control of your data. It will be a lot more cumbersome than have a centralized, but it definitely is an option, and also gives the ability to allow to innovate on top of the of what I call it, the logistic internet.
So may I ask, what route are the other parts of the logistical chain looking at? I mean, have they chosen the route they want to go, for instance, land transport or?
No. Yeah, but most is actually having the centralized part. So we build a centralized, and that's obvious option as well. I mean, the incumbent in industry comes together and build a centralized solution, and that is great. The challenge is, can you do that? And can you get something that is neutral enough? Example is, for example, if you take Intra as an example, I mean, it started up also as industry collaboration, but now is sold to first a venture fund and now to E2 Open. And I think something like, is that 20-25% of all container bookings goes via Intra. So they have actually now become an important player in the industry.
So they are the equivalent to Amazon or Google or Facebook or eBay.
They are not as big right now, but definitely yes, they have the potential to do that, and there's other that is trying to do similar things. So again, you probably have better control of it, obvious, than it's just a third party emerging. But you definitely also need to understand what you're doing if you're creating a centralized platform. Also, because I mean you need to have the other everyone involved in it. I mean, is it okay that just the top three that is funding or controlling the digital platform? Should it be all of it? Should it be 20? I mean, how many is enough? And that is, of course, a question, because again, you can say it's okay for the container shipping industry if you've got some like top 5, top 6 there. You have, what is that, 60, 70, 80% of global, or at least the containers. But there's obvious other players in the supply chain. You've got all the forwarders, you've got customs, you've got the trucks, you've got railroads and those kind of things. And can they accept that this digital platform, centralized digital platform, is controlled by a few shipping companies? That's a question, of course, and still to be seen, because it is a lot easier if there's just one place to go and everyone can decide. But is that acceptable in the whole ecosystem? That's another discussion.
Yeah, and you have other kinds of goods that is transported, for instance. I mean,
absolutely.
Most of our energy is transported by ship. And then yes, there is also sort of a journey for that one to go to the consumer. And will they accept
exactly
the same system as the container business? I mean,
yeah.
We're dealing with the maritime industry here, Henrik.
Yeah. But it is, and it's both interesting and it's frustrating, right? But it is, of course, but it is a basic decision. I mean, the one that's going to be in the middle, they are going to, you need some kind of middleman, either on the protocol or computer level, or actually a legal entity, or, as I said, distributed. And it is a very important decision, because the decision that the industry is going to take should not be just some kind of, you could say, accidental decision that, oops, now we just emerged and we didn't really think about it. So they need to make sure that they know, why are we taking this decision? If we go the centralized way, this means that we are actually building a strong player that will be in between, that is going to control the whole value chain, the whole business ecosystem. Is that okay? Can that be accepted by everyone else involved in the business ecosystem, etc.? So those decisions you need to take, and be cautious about who's going.
And who is deciding? Who are you talking to about this? More than the World Economic Forum, I understand, but who is deciding? Who are the leaders in this?
And this is, of course, also another challenge, and who's going to take the lead? You've seen some of the shipping companies have started, again, with my innovation with TradeLens. Is one activity. You also see something like IPCSA, for example. They actually created something they call the network of networks, which is really a possibility to link all the different trade community port community systems around the globe. So in that case, there is some opportunities for that you're working together. Similar things as if you look at trade single windows, for example, there is some discussions on the WCO, World Customs Organization, World Trade Organization, on how can we actually build this kind of platform that connects all the different trade single windows. That was the work I did in Argentina was one example of where my task was really to look at can we use blockchain for trade single windows in a country. My recommendation there was no, because there you already have a trusted third party. You've got the customs typical running the trade single windows. But my recommendation was to look at can we actually use blockchain as a kind of layer between the different trade single windows. Because one thing is, again, as we talked about with the business, one thing is that you can optimize your internal processes in the country, in customs. But as soon as you then need to present your bill of lading, your FITO certificate, your export declaration, or whatever it is there, in many cases you need to print it out and then show the physical form. You need to have a kind of digital platform that all customs trust and ensure that the digital FITO that is presented, for example, that it actually comes from the authority in the exporting country that is allowed to issue that trade document. And that could be, for example, blockchain again, if you want to have a neutral, because this is obviously a big challenge when we talk about global trade, because if you want to do centralized, you need to have a legal entity controlling it. And where should that legal entity be placed? It should have been in the US. The Chinese may see things that's not a good idea in Russia, and the challenge, right? So, yeah.
I think I have listened to so many people now in the Corona times that we are living in, that are saying that there is a need for a digital trade. We cannot continue without a digital trade in some way, because it has been so obvious that we are vulnerable, and the people that should be there and show that document, they are at home because they are isolated or they are ill or so on. I spoke with someone in Bangladesh the other day, and they said, we want a digital system.
But everyone, and not only because of COVID, again, that has probably illustrated one of the challenges, but everyone has been talking about the papers. As part of the investigation for the business model or business case for TradeLens. I was in Kenya, we were in the US, etc. Tried to follow containers. I was there with a PhD, Henrik Hvid Jensen, that has done tremendous work on that part, following the container, and he identified that each container, when he printed out the papers, each container has been several inches deep, a number of papers there, and it was papers. It was not something like that has just been printed out. It was papers, because you need to present it, the drill, and it's just cumbersome, and everyone knows it. It's also been interesting when I presented the concept of, it was called a shipping information pipeline at that time in Maersk, everyone accepted, yes, it is a problem, it's great, it looks fine, etc. But nobody really has this $5 or $10 million to realize it, because obviously you need to take some upfront investment.
But do you think that the situation we are in now has sort of made any difference, that it will be quicker? Or
I don't know if COVID has it put some light on it, but it probably has put a light on a lot of a lot of things that is missing in the societies, including global trade. But again, the movement out there, you see the DCSA that has been started with the biggest carriers, except for Costco, is of course one step in a direction. Although the interesting thing with DCSA is that they are focused on this. I remember I talked about this one-to-one connection. They define the APIs. They're defining how does a bill look like, how does the interaction works with your mutual business partner. They are not focusing on how do you actually create this connect once to share with everyone everywhere, just like the internet. Whether that should be a focus of them or somebody else should do that, I don't know. But it's obvious that you need to somehow build an organization or set up an organization that can define those standards and make sure that they are, as I talked about before, politically, commercially, and competitively neutral, or as much as possible. Just like the internet, which is fairly, everyone can use the internet, everyone can set up a homepage, Everyone can use a browser to access that homepage. So it is fairly neutral, the internet, and that is what I see the same thing as what I call it logistic internet should include as well, having the same neutrality. And that is a challenge. But if you don't have that, you don't get the Chinese, you don't get the Russian, you don't get the US. Etc.
Yeah, but how do you see the future for the global trade, and how do you see it? Will it happen, or is it just endless work from your side?
It will happen because there's so much benefits in it. But as I said, but whether it's going to happen on a centralized part, and again, there was two options there. There was either a third party coming in and winning it all. Is it going to be Amazon that is suddenly starting to have some very fancy things? Is it going to be Intra? Is it going to be TC Nexus? I don't know. And there's a lot of other competitors out there trying to work in that space. Or is it a centralized platform like for example, TradeLens is moving toward now with the ownership and the shared ownership of many of the cargo holders. The challenge, again, as I talked about, is it enough it's maybe enough when we just see container shipping, but what about the forwarders? What about the customs? What about the terminals? What about ports, trucks, rails, etc.? Can they accept those things there? And then there's the other options, as talked about, decentralized or distributed.
I think one of the things that, there is a lot of discussions about the crew change. It's difficult to change and go home because they're not allowed to travel and so on. And I think that has put a light on the fact that we do not have any visibility. We are not known. People do not know about us. We do a lot of work, almost everything has been on a ship sometime in the journey. And no one knows about it. Will this, what you are talking about, the digital global trade, also be helped by us being more visible to show what we're doing? Because I think that is part of it, that no one knows the work we do.
Yeah, but is it important, right? Because you are obvious. If you look at the consumer, obvious, any supply chain manager in any company, they know what the industry is doing. But is it important for the consumer to know how much effort that's actually been in transporting the avocados that we have in our shops, the oranges? So
maybe there is. Maybe the young generation has a totally different view on fair trade and all of that.
Yeah. In that case, yes, you're of course right in promoting the industry as an exciting place to work in. That is of course important, and you're probably right that in communicating more about how fantastic that it actually is that you can again eat your avocados up here and how sustainable actually the transport is in most cases would be a very interesting thing. And I remember at Maersk, we definitely had challenges in communicating, that the container transport was actually fairly efficient. One thing is that the ship sends out a lot of pollution, a lot of carbon dioxide, but it also transports 15,000 to 20,000 containers. I remember one of the calculations that was done was that, if you take a pair of sneakers, the emission that it costs from sailing it from China to Europe, or actually was less than the emission from you driving it home in your car from the supermarket to your home. And those kind of things is obviously also important to tell.
Yeah, but if then the people who are going to decide on how we should move forward on what you're working with, the digital trade, if they knew more about what we're doing, maybe it would be easier for them to just take some action instead of hiding behind the big cost of it.
Yes, but again, there is discussions. There's been a lot of research. We talked about also with Michael Lind's all his work he's done with collaborative decision making. There's been a lot of research. The shipping information pipeline is actually also comes from a EU-sponsored research. There's a lot of conferences, and I agree with you. It is a question of somebody taking a decision. Let us now try to do that. And can it be the industry? Can it be again World Economic Forum, perhaps? Should it be some of the? Should it be IMO? Should it be? There's different organizations that should take the lead, but they should understand again that they need to build something similar to the internet, or at least similar to the value proposition that the internet has. And again, I'm coming back to saying political, commercially, and competitively neutral for everyone in the ecosystem, not just for the 6 carriers or the 10 carriers, but really for everyone in the ecosystem, for the forwarders, the truckers, etc. in there.
What is the next step in what you're doing? What are you seeing for the future?
I'm trying to, as I said, get some support on the idea about that you really need to do more than just the standards, that you actually need to think about, again, logistic internets, building something, building components, building infrastructures, digital infrastructures that means that you can just build on top of this one here, but you need to have some central components, because if everyone is just building their own version, we are stuck with the one-to-one connections. We need to get this the internet-like paradigm of connect once to share with everyone. And again, I see the global trade identity as the cornerstone of this one here, because this is also what gives you power. I mean, if you control the identity, I mean, you have the power. I mean, you can see on the consumer space, you have a Facebook that will love every one of us to log on with your Facebook ID or Google ID or your Microsoft ID on any services, because then they are controlling all these kind of things. Instead of, I mean, the global trade identity design that I will work World Economic Forum on gives a lot of what I call self-managed identities. So the identities control or the entities. The legal entities controls their identity themselves. Also because you cannot have an identity solution where somebody decides whether they want to issue an identity for the Swedish government or for the Danish government or for the Chinese government, for the UK government, etc. That has to be controlled by the government itself. Therefore, you had to make it more self-managed.
It's so interesting, I think. But you are an optimist, aren't you?
I am. But again, it is the way that you had to go. I mean, you need to digitize the ecosystem. And as I said, there's different options. Everything will see an improvement. It's depending on what is the business model, what is the threats that you see, and then you need to start. But also, the earlier you get, the faster you get the digitization, the better it is for the industry. It is saving money, but I think I also mentioned in the beginning, but also for the developing countries. I mean, there is again a World Economic Forum report and also UN report that is looking into what would it mean to reduce trade barriers, and the digitization is part of the trade barriers. And you see that in some of the developing countries, I mean, you could see it's up to 20%. It is a significant reduction in trade barriers. Smaller trade barriers mean more trade. More trade gives more prosperity in a country. So this is also a way to fulfill UN's first sustainability goal, which is no poverty.
Did you ever have a role model growing up?
If I had a role model growing up?
Yes.
No, not necessarily. No, I didn't really have a role model in that sense.
Do you consider yourself a role model nowadays?
I'd like to inspire people about the opportunities that emerging technologies gives. In that sense, whether I'm a role model, I don't know, but I like to be. I think it is important to digitize the right way. I'm actually also working on another concept where we look at the circular economy with the same idea. Can we actually also go in and build some building blocks so we can accelerate the innovation on circular economy? And I think those things is fantastic that you actually can at the same time, you can help yourself. I mean, if you're an incumbent in industry, because you can make your processes, you can make the whole ecosystem that you're part of better. But at the same time, you can actually also make the world a better place. And that is interesting opportunities.
Who do you think I should meet the next? Who do you think I should interview in the shipping podcast? Who would you be interested in listening to?
There's probably a lot of people. I can't remember everyone that you had on your podcast. Maybe actually, I mean, one of my previous colleagues is doing some work down in Kenya on the digitization of in East Africa about some of the same thoughts that I've been talking about here. Maybe you talk to some of the guys in Trademark East Africa. That maybe it'd be interesting to get at least their perspective instead of just having me talking about what does this mean for developing countries, but actually talking to the people down there and see what do they believe is interesting. maybe also hearing about, how far is the IPCSA on the network of networks. The chairman, Richard, there could be interesting to talk to. Yeah, but definitely, Thomas Bakke, the CEO, and Henning Schleierbach is also very interesting. You can also ask them if they agree with me about that their standards is what I call it's a necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need to have these components as well to really accelerate digitization of global trade. Yeah, Nadja Hewitt from World Economic Forum I've been working with is actually very, very interesting and very, very knowledgeable. So that may actually be one of the most interesting parts.
Good. You've given me some ideas now. Thank you. Thank you very much for being my guest on the Shipping Podcast. Thank you, Henrik. How exciting. I think I understand that the maritime industry is at a crossroad right now, and that it's time to take a decision on a roadmap for the future before someone else does it for us. I am currently enjoying some holiday, so I will leave you to digest what Henrik was talking about, but we'll be back again with a new episode in 2 weeks' time. Until then, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.